Apple II forever, making life better and better. Apple II forever and ever, bringing the rainbow to you.
Great. So my name's Tom Giacchi. This is my second KFest. So it's been fun. I want to thank everybody for all the help. Last night I had a panic attack when the white smoke came out of the power supply on my 2E, and we had some nice folks really help out to get that repaired and going for today's demo. So everybody's been great. So I just want to say thank you for all that and all the welcomingness and friendliness of everybody here. It's a great group, and I'm glad to be back for my second year. So what I'm presenting today is an all-in-one floppy drive emulator for the Apple II, as well as a flux imager, so you can image your floppy disks, whether they're copy protected or not. I'm going to go through the slide deck pretty quickly. I want to do a demo and then leave it open for questions and or suggestions. So how does it work? Inside this box here, and on that motherboard, I have two Raspberry Pi Picos. One's a W, one's a regular one. And it scans the Apple II floppy drive at 16 megahertz, which is 64 times oversampling of the bits coming in. So that allows me to do things like protected copy protection, weak bits, detect all of that in hardware and a combination of software. So pretty much virtually any copy protected software can be copied. Inside the drive, I also are going to ship a little track sensor, and you put that in, and there's a little magnet that goes on the spindle for your the drive control of the motor, and it'll detect when a full circle has gone around. That's used for speed timing. It's used for being able to align tracks for copy protections that use sync tracks, and that comes with the unit as well. Why an emulator? Well, simple. How many of you have lost disks that went bad? Right? And also, how many of you had floppy drives themselves that have gone bad? That's why you need the emulator and the flux copier. So what does the emulator and flux copier do? It's simple. It makes WAS images or A24eVR raw images from your floppies. It stores them on an SD card in the unit itself. This box actually has a little removable SD card in it, 64 gig, and you can store 250,000 Apple WAS images on there. I think that's probably enough for most people, but if it's not, the board can actually support a 2 terabyte SD card. So if you have 4 million images, you're still good. The other thing it does is you can see on one side there's floppy connections, on the back side there's floppy connections, so that way you can actually still have access to your floppy drives even though that's in line, so you can boot off the real floppies as well as the emulator. And that's just controlled by software. Why flux imaging? Well, again, you gotta get your data off your diskette somehow, right? And you could use things like, I guess ADT Pro to kind of move the stuff around, but that's slow, it's time consuming, a little more prone to error. This will do it, on average, a non-protected disk in under 15 seconds. And that's the slow version. I will have an optimized version that will do it in 11 in a few weeks. And it basically handles all copy protection except ProLock, because ProLock has little holes burned on the media, and there's just nothing I can do about that to emulate that. Burning holes in SD cards doesn't work. I've tried. So again, 15 seconds for unprotected, worst case scenario, 60 seconds for a protected disk. If you happen to know where the tracks are, it's going to be faster. That's assuming you're imaging literally every quarter track and letting the software figure it out. Pretty straightforward. It's simple. It supports 2 drives, comes with 2 track sensors, all the cables. You'll notice this one does not happen to have DB19s on them because I haven't been able to find a supply of DB19s. However, yesterday I managed to find a potential supply of DB19s. So the final version will have a DB19 to hook your Unidisks to, as well as your Apple II DB19 floppy controller, and it'll also have a DB25, so you can hook up your cable from your Duo disk, and it'll act just like a Duo disk. So where was I last year? Well, for those of you who are here, you remember this. That's what it looked like. A little bit of, baling wire and white wires and breadboards and everything that you could possibly go. That literally 2 days before I got here last year, I was sitting there with a hot glue gunning the wires down so it wouldn't fall apart during travel. And I only had to fix 4 wires last year, so it wasn't too bad, but it was really in an early prototype state. And this is where I was 4 weeks ago. A little bit more compact, but not quite where I am today. So I'll say watch the demo. You'll see where I'm at. As you can see, that's what it's going to finally look like. The production boards are in. This is one of the boards, fully populated. I don't know if you can see that or not. When I'm done, I'll pass it around if people want to look at it. First thing I'll do is demo the Apple II booting off of the emulator. Just let me know when you switch it over. There we go. And just reboot the Apple II right off the emulator. Now I'm going to exit out of this and bring up the next piece of code. So I'm going to stop, start, and shrink. And stretch this down and stretch this up. Okay, so now we can switch back to HDMI, because now we're going to kind of go into the software. So the software is going to be available initially for Windows. Android will follow fairly shortly after that, then Mac OS, and then iOS. I'm doing that because I decided to use .NET MAUI for anybody who's done cross-platform stuff. It's a really cool .NET platform for cross-application development. Works really well. There are some idiosyncrasies, though, things like network access that are unique to each operating system that got a hand code, which is why they're not all at one going. So on the screen, what you'll see is basically this display. It talks about what your drive info is for your emulator. You can check your drive speed, which I cannot do today because my track sensor did not survive the trip, unfortunately. But on the SD card, right, that's some of the titles that are on the SD card, and then you can actually select just by typing what you want. Let's say bouncing Kumungas, and you would say load, and it would put it in and let you boot off of that. And that's all it takes to load a new image. And when that's on your phone, it's just dip, 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 and you're done. So kind of show you that. That's what the interface is going to basically look like. And then fast imaging is the next piece, and I just have to temporarily power down to switch cables here real quick. Ordinarily, I'd have the pass-through working, but I didn't have it working in time for today. So that's good. That should be good. Give it a moment to connect the network. And again, for fast copying, that's all it takes is you put in a title, tell it which disk drive number you want, and as long as it's connected to the network, and we'll know momentarily, it did not connect to the network yet, of course. Just give me a moment, it'll reconnect. Just got to give it 20 seconds or so to find the Wi-Fi. These little Wi-Fi temporary ones for travel are okay, but they're a little finicky connecting. So just give that a moment for it to find it. It takes about 30 seconds. Now, ordinarily when you boot up, you boot whatever last image you had loaded, so it doesn't delay anything. You can just boot your Apple II. But it takes about 30 seconds to go out, find the network, and make all the wireless connections for you to use the software. So sometimes you have to wait a little bit, but once it's connected, you're good and stable. So let's just make sure this works here. Connected, that's a better sign. And shrink that down so you don't need that. And then we're going to scroll this up and enlarge it. There we go. And you can kind of see on the bottom, it's tracking, and the disk drive is, you can see it's counting up which track it's reading. And that number after it is actually how many flux transitions it's seen on the track. I'll explain a little bit about flux transitions so people understand what that is. On an Apple II floppy drive, bits are written as zeros are one value, whatever value you wrote last. It extends that, and as long as the voltage hasn't changed, the drive sees it as a 0. When you want to write a 1, you reverse the polarity, and that's what they call a flux transition. That becomes a 1. And as you're reading that through, that's how many flux transitions are on the track, and that can represent any particular number of bits. It's typically on most disks about 51,000 bits. And then it analyzes it, does the error checking, and produces the image. And that's all it takes to image a floppy. And you can see how fast that was. And then, because I don't have the track sensor, I can't demo actually reading in a copy-protected diskette. But basically, the screen is similar, except you can select the title, which disk side you're copying, to build the WAS name properly. And then you can select what tracks you want, right? You can start track, end track, and then the step. So let's say you want to copy every half track. You could start at 1.5, go to 34 by 1, and when you want to add it in, all you do is hit the plus sign, it adds it to the table, and then all you have to do is hit start, and it will image it. So it's basically the same logic as the fast copy, and it just basically, that's all that's needed. Now, if you don't know where the tracks are, because some copy protections make it really hard to find, you could just simply specify every quarter track. Takes a little longer. The other piece that is not here on this screen but is in development is what I call boot tracing. And what you do is you have the floppy drive hooked up, you have the emulator hooked up to the Apple II, and you say boot trace. And the board just sits there quietly waiting for you to hit Control, Open Apple, Reset. It sees the recalibration sequence and goes, oh, I know I'm copying a diskette. And it watches the tracks that are available, and then you say, I'm done booting. Everything's loaded, start, and it'll go image those tracks and make a WAS. So you don't have to know where the tracks are. So, and that's what there is basically to it. If you have a large WAS collection, which a lot of folks do, all you have to do is pop the SD card, pop it into your PC, and I have a directory called import. Just copy everything into the import directory, plug it back in, turn it back on, and all the images are just available for you. So you don't have to do anything particularly special to make that happen. So that's basically what I had to demo today. But I'm here just to ask, have you guys ask me questions. I want to try to get feedback of things that, hey, this is what I run into, because I'm only one person, right? I don't live your experience when you're using the two. So, first, any questions? Yes?
I think I missed it. I was thinking copy. When you're imaging the disk, it's an image that on your device?
Yes. Yep, goes right into the device and is available for emulation immediately. Yes?
I have two statements for you. Number one, if you need more DB19s, I have source.
Yes, we talked the other night about that. So you're my guy. So give him a round of applause.
Second statement, do you have a DBA or when that's going to be announced at the time it's going to be available?
Yes. So the board you see here is the last non-production board. The production boards will have the DB25s and DB19s on them. I expect to run a production run in August and have them available in September back to me. And then whatever software tweaks I have to do, I'll ship production in October, and I'm taking requests for beta Before then, I only want to keep it like 4 or 5 beta testers, keep it reasonable. And also, just so you know, I mentioned it at the vendor night, but if you want to sign up, I'll just take a picture of your badge. In October, when they become available, instead of being $199, I'll do it for $159 for KFest attendees. And it gets better, and then I'll let you have your next question. I have an emulator-only version of this available that'll also come out in October. So it's smaller, only about that big, and it takes away the imaging piece, because each and every one of you here, I know, has more than one Apple II. And that's going to be $99 retail, and if you say, hey, I want it, and you were at KFest, I'll do them for $79. So, yes, Jeremy?
You had a little feature on this, you have an image on your computer, you just go upload, attach a file, and that will then sit over to the SD card, and then we can take the SD card.
You know, I thought about that, and I decided that was an awful lot of work to put in to have people just pop it in and copy 10 or 20 or 30 files on at once. Maybe down the road, if it becomes really requested, I'll do it, but I don't like reinventing the wheel. So, yes.
Just to make sure that there's also a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, that's 5 quarters, 3.5.
So right now, 5 1/4. I will be supporting 3.5s. I just haven't gotten there yet. The hardware supports it.
Will this kind of thing, the competition is really good for our computers because it gives us more options and it gets people excited and innovative and all that. But right now, we're kind of going down like one floppy emulation product for Macintosh machines. Okay. You may add some additional support for that in the future.
Yeah, so the question was, will I consider making the emulator available for the Macintosh? Possibly. I don't have any Macintoshes. Once this is so once this is stabilized and kind of finalized, then I'll start looking at other things. Because the hardware itself is so flexible, there's no reason why it couldn't do a Mac emulation. It would just be looking at what signals are coming out and understanding what timing the bits need to be played back at. Other than that, I think it would basically be the same. And I couldn't manage it being much different than that. Yes, Chris.
So the default format for writing this is WAS,
Yes.
right? And then what about for the nibble?
So it creates 2 files. It automatically creates an A24eVR on the device itself and stores it, and then it sends up that information, converts it to a WAS on the software on the laptop or your phone, because that's a little more compute intensive.
The E-source, is that the same as the applesauce?
Yes, that's the applesauce flux level imaging. So I've maintained compatibility. So I also support flux maps in the WAS file as well for those copy protected disks that have unique timing. That all works. And I also support the solved A24eVR files for emulation. You cannot write to those, however. Those are read-only, and that's really the 99.999% case. The other thing I am adding, it's not here, but from that first screen where you're talking about disk info and what's in there, there'll be a couple of what I call accelerator buttons that will have DOS 3.3 blank image, ProDOS blank image, and totally blank image that you can load. And then you just have to do it that way, and then you've got a bootable DOS 3.3 diskette or a bootable ProDOS diskette that you can just copy with and work. So you don't have to go format one and go through all that headache and change disks. And because I found that really annoying when I was working on this. So somebody else had questions? Yes.
First one's probably pretty quick, and sorry if it's obvious. So can I download a WAS or a A24eVR image from the net somewhere and reconstitute a physical media?
So not at the moment, just because I haven't gotten around to writing all the software and testing it, but the hardware will support write-backs. So yes, you'll be able to recreate images. Yep. Probably version 1.2 based on my current timeline.
And the second one was like just as someone who's I'm not a floppy disk expert, I don't understand the use case for like telling it which tracks I want to copy. I can't figure out why someone would be wanting that.
So this goes to so the question was, why do I need to know which tracks to copy, right? And there's two answers to that. When Woz created the disk 2, he put the track positioning, timing, how long you write bits at, completely under the control of the 6502 and the programmer. So intrepid programmers who wanted to protect their games mostly decided, well, if I put them out there in standard format, everybody can copy them. So what I'll do is I'll hide and put data on different tracks in different spots of the disk in different formats, and then good luck trying to figure out what that is. So a lot of the early copy programs like Copy2+ would have a parameter file that would describe which tracks to copy. That's there for the convenience of speed, now on my system, and storage. If it only has 6 tracks, why copy the whole floppy? That's why the option of adding the tracks is there. You can just simply image every quarter track, and then it'll figure out which ones are duplicate, which ones aren't real, and produce a reasonably optimized image from that. So you don't have to worry about that. It just takes a little bit longer to physically copy.
So I guess what I'm asking is, when would I know to ask it to only copy 6 tracks? Where is that? Is that command level knowledge? Is that just someone on a different level than the guy?
So there are parameter files for like Copy2+ on the web that kind of describe what each diskette looks like. So you can find that information, type it in.
If you're at a level where you can understand that information, then you can feed that into how you use the code.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's what the intent there is. I probably will eventually be able to actually take whatever the last version of Copy2+'s parameter file is and import it. I just haven't gotten there.
Do you know, were there any games that, like, if you actually copied all the tracks and it would not work? Like, if only wanted track 1 from 6.
No, so if there were extra tracks there, that doesn't hurt, right? What'll happen is you'll find that if it was a true original copy, not like a copy of a copy, right? Those tracks are just blank. And basically the software realizes they're blank and won't even include them. So it'll automatically optimize those out. But if you had it like a DOS 3.3 disk and then you copy stuff over that, you're going to now have data on those extra tracks and they're going to be in the Woz image, and they're not really real to the program. Yes, you had a question.
There are many companies that made disk 2 clones for the Apple II. Have you found it matters on the quality of doing these flux copies? Are there some brands that work better or easier to modify the drives? Are there any preferences that make it work better, or that just make it not work?
So the question was, basically, have I tried like clone drives and what my results were with those? So I have not tried any clone drives. I've only used duo disks, unidisks, and disk 2s in probably 5 different flavors of disk 2s, because Apple kept switching things out, which it turns out that I originally had a track sensor that used an optical sensor instead of a magnetic Hall sensor. And what I found was when I put the case back on some of them, the paint caused too much reflection, and I was getting false signals. But on others, it worked fine because I had that black, right? And it's just like one of those weird things. So I went to a magnetic Hall sensor. But I haven't tried any clones. So if there are beta testers out there who have other types of drives, give it a shot. Let me know what it is. And one of the things that's cool on this that I didn't cover, on the back here, you can't really see it. When I pass it around, you'll see it. There's a little slot right next to the track sensor connectors. And that's a 9-pin adapter so that I can build auxiliary boards for controlling other things. So like at some point, if I want to be able to support 1.44 megabyte floppies, I'll have the extra lines available there to tell it that's what I'm doing, and the firmware will know, and then you can go and do that. So there's a lot of expansion built into the product right off the bat, because I know I'm not going to get everything right the first time. Other questions? Yes.
I have a few
So I have not tried track sensors from Applesauce. I have to see what his pinouts are, or whether they're the same as mine. It's basically still just a 3-wire connector. They are the 3.5 audio connectors. So as long as he's doing it the same pinout as mine, they should work. But I ship them with the unit anyway. You don't have to buy them separately. So each one will have 2.
And the accelerator machine still be accelerating during the process, or do you have to knock back on the
So the imaging is done completely independent of your Apple. The only thing it's done is in boot trace mode, just to find the tracks, but the actual imaging is actually done with the Picos. So it's completely independent of the machine. Other questions? Yes?
If you require an expert outlet for the sale of your product, let me know.
I would be happy to do that. We can talk afterwards. Anything else? Yes?
Do you have any, like, unexpected, I'm sure you have a ton of unexpected, but like things that you came across through the process of developing your product that you thought were going to be a breeze and then it turned out to be a nightmare, or you had to go down something kind of television and think that up?
Yeah, I'll repeat that question. Let me just take a quick swig. So, did I run into unexpected things that were substantially harder than I thought they would be, and I thought they'd be easy, and they weren't? So yeah, there were a bunch of things that I ran into like that. I had talked to Chris previously. When writing the emulation, I originally set up the board to actually monitor the phases of the disk drive coming from the Apple for emulation with an interrupt line. And I only have the interrupts enabled when the drive is on. Well, Bouncing Kamungas steps the heads while the drive's turned off. So that failed. Little things like I was pulling my hair out running Commando, figuring out why my emulation was wrong on Commando. It wasn't the emulation. Just my 2E didn't have the 64K extra card in it, and Commando doesn't tell you that it needs 128K. So, I spent a day tracking that down. Those kind of things I ran into. Something else that I ran into, which was really weird, I thought I damaged the drive. I was running seek tests on it when I got the new boards back, and the heads are going bang, 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 bang. And I'm like, what the hell did I do wrong? I'm checking all my connections, making sure I have all the pins right, and I do. And I'm like, this makes no sense. Did my drive just go bad? So put a diskette in it, put it on the Apple II, quiet, boots up, right? I'm like, okay. So I just take the connector off, plug it back on, try it again, and it's quiet. Like, that's odd. So, take the diskette out again and put it on the side. So I just want to do the seeks without it. And as soon as you take the diskette out and try to seek, bang, 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 bang. So it was literally intended to have the load of the diskette on there. And so you have to have a diskette in if you try to seek. And it doesn't do it on all the drives, just certain revs of the Shugart mechanisms. And I spent, a little while figuring that one out. So it's just a learning process on everything as you go through it. And I'm sure there'll still be things I find that I run into and beta testers run into that I didn't expect. Any other questions? That's it. Well, thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
So a couple questions on the chat here. So first of all, somebody was just wondering what the KFest price was, if you want to.
Yep. So I'll cover that. So ordinarily the device itself retails for $199. I'm doing KFest price for $159. There's also a purely emulator only version, which removes the flux copying because everybody may have 5 or 6 or 7 or 100 apples in their basement. For those, that's going to be $99, normally $79 for a KFest price.
Thank
and
you.
it emulates 2 drives.
Awesome. Okay, and then there was a question about ProLock, which is the copy protection scheme, and somebody's wondering, they're just asking, does the WAS2 format have no way to represent a dead zone?
It doesn't, unfortunately. So the way I've thought of handling that, if there's enough interest, right? Because I'm going to focus on the high priority items first. If there's enough interest, WAS has this metadata section in the file. So in theory, I could add a field in there that says ProLock at track this, offset this, and read that in and make the emulator handle it that way. If there's enough interest and enough call for it. But that would be a low priority item for me.
Okay, cool. And then let's see, Kat is asking, will this also write to disks from a .waz or other file like the applesauce?
Yes, hardware can. Right now in version 1 of the software, I will not be supporting that because my focus is getting data in. But yes, you'll be able to write out regular as well as copy protected images. I've tested the hardware for it, it works, but cleaning up the software and making it presentable is another issue.
Cool.
Another one just popped in.
Okay.
It says, what were the most useful resources you used to learn about how the hardware worked? Wow. So some of that was previous knowledge because I had been hacking software years and years and years ago when I was a teenager. So I learned a lot about the Apple II hardware then, but a lot of it had to come back, right? It was kind of, bit rot after nearly 40 years. Unlike, not that much unlike the floppies. Beneath Apple, DOS was a good resource. Understanding the Apple IIe was a good resource. I disassembled some of DOS and used that as a resource. So those were the primary resources. And then, of course, having an oscilloscope and logic probe hooked up to the drives and to the floppy connectors while it was actually running to take a look at what was actually happening timing-wise, clarified a lot of stuff that was unclear from the documentation. So that's kind of the approach I took. One of the things I did to make sure the bits are actually represented just like the Apple when you create the WAS file, instead of reinterpreting the flux patterns myself, I actually wrote an interpreter for the P6 ROM on the Disk 2 controller. So it actually uses the same exact state machine that the Disk 2 controller does to interpret bits. So you're getting the exact same representation that the Apple II would in the WAS image. Looks like I got another question here. ADT Pro does not work on M series Macs, so we need some new solutions. Okay, yes. So right now, I do not support the Mac in emulation. I'm looking into it, what that would take. There are some pinout differences on the controllers that I have to work through. But software-wise, it should not be much of an issue, and I would support the MOOF format in those cases.
There is a bit of time. If you can remember some of the things that you were talking about in Springfield, you could also readdress those.
Sure. So I can cover a few things. I'm trying to remember back. It was a little bit of a blur. But one of the questions was 3.5-inch support originally, and as I said, not the first version of the software or the beta version of the hardware because it does require different pinouts. But the shipping version will support 800K 3.5 drives, and those should be able to image Mac disks as well as 2GS disks. But the Mac emulator will be a separate thing. But the emulator itself and the flux copier will work on a 2GS, 2 Plus, 2E. I have not hooked it up to a 2C, so I don't know how that would hook in. So if somebody's got a 2C and wants to help out, I'd be happy to work with you on that to make sure that works. Let's see what else. As I say, the Windows version is the first version. And I'm do some cleanup on the video display for that. One of the things that I kind of covered in questions and answered is why would it take 60 seconds versus 15 seconds to copy a copy protected disk? And that's because you literally have to step, if you don't know what the tracks are, because the way Apple copy protection works, the Apple Disk 2 can literally step on quarter track increments, and you can write data at any of those quarter tracks. And if you don't know where that data is, it's really kind of hard to copy an image. So that's what a lot of copy protections did. They did half tracks initially, then quarter tracks, different format data to find the data. The different formats, not a problem. I do resolution, not the nibble level, but the bit level on the track. So finding the data is pretty easy. But if you image all 140 quarter tracks on a disk, it'll take about 60 seconds to do that. And that, what it will then do is literally compare track 0 to track quarter. If they're the same, it drops the quarter track. It compares 1/4 to 1/2. If those are the same, it drops the half track, and so on. So it only ends up storing actually what's on the diskette. And that will make it automatically handle things like wide tracks, where the disks were written on a special drive back in the day, where the head was, let's say, 2 or 3 times as wide as a standard disk head. And things like EA Sports did a lot of that. And they would literally step the head while reading and continue reading. And the tracks have to be perfectly aligned, or exact bit copies of each other, bit images of each other, to support copy protection. And the analysis code will support that automatically.
Tom, I have a question.
Sure.
I can't remember if you answered this and I just missed it, but what about non Apple II disk drives? You know, so third party disk drives from back in the day. Like, is it going to work with those?
So hardware wise, it can. So what comes out of the back end of the device are the standard 2 IDC connectors, or the DB19. What to support other types of floppy drives, you would just have to build a little adapter to do that, to map the pins correctly. And on the back of the unit itself, there's a 9-pin JST connector for expansion. So if there's things that you need to do that you can't do off the IDCs, there's 9 additional pins there that I can use to add additional support boards for other things. And in theory, again, would require analysis. If somebody wanted to take that up, the Commodores and Ataris of the day also use 35-track drives. So I could get the flux data in for those with the current software, but analyzing it would be another issue. But if there's enough, call for that at some point, I might do that. Or I'll document, I'll store them in A2R3 format, so anybody could write something to convert those then to the other formats pretty easily. Let's see, is there any reason why this wouldn't work for an Apple III sauce disk? No. An Apple III sauce disk is exactly a standard floppy 16 sector. All they did was change the physical sector ordering on sauce, just like they did for ProDOS, to speed up the reads a little bit, but they're identical, and they would image with the fast imaging, just like any other 16 sector diskette. I got one more question. The applesauce utilities. Okay. Yes. So yes, the applesauce utilities would be able to read the A2R format and analyze it. And another question. Okay. Can I image 40-track drives? For non-protected disks, yes. There's actually a little switch on the fast image that tells it whether you want to copy a 35 or 40-track drive, and it emulates both. And I do not support anything to do with the Cairo images. I don't know what I've heard of them. I've never seen the product. I've never used the product. So I have no idea on that at all at the moment.
Yeah, the CryoFlux images are, I think they're somewhat proprietary, but they're there's someone named Kier F who has done some work reverse engineering it. I think that you can find the information on that. But yeah, I mean, I think largely it hasn't been used for the Apple II very much.
Okay. And again, right, I'm open to suggestions and ideas. Right, when I was at KFest physically, somebody asked about the Mac emulation and how to support that, and I've spent the last week in the evenings digging through what it would take to support a Mac. And the way I decided to do it, I haven't implemented the hardware yet, obviously, because it's brand new. But inside the Mac, I'll actually have a little ribbon cable going to a little Zigbee controller that will transmit the enable signal from inside the Mac to another Zigbee controller that's hooked up outside the Mac, and then hooked to the standard emulator. So you can literally support two Mac drives. And that's the easiest way. You don't have to put any holes in your Apple case to get the other signals out, because unfortunately, the DB19, from everything I've read, only has the enable for the external drive on it. So that way you can do it without any hardware changes to your cases and don't want to damage anything. That was the easiest way to get the signal through the plastic. So that's how I'm going to approach that. If there's no other questions, I appreciate everybody's time. Keep reaching out to me on the Discord or my email. I'm happy to answer any questions, and take requests, etc. Yeah, thanks.